So on the banks of the Ohio River in Cincinnati, just near the football stadium and the baseball stadium. Boo. Okay, we're closer to Cleveland or Pittsburgh, depending on which. But down there on the river is the National Underground Railroad Museum. And it's a museum built in testimony to the, obviously, Underground Railroad. And around the block from that is one of the bigger foundations, operating foundations in the school transformation, personalized learning is their mantra now. But a big part of their organization is futures thinking, and they have for a long time had resident futurists. And I'm not sure how many they're up to now, 3, 4, maybe more. And one of their big things is systems thinking. That's their systems thinking. To them, it's sort of a follow-on to the design thinking movement. They never quite jumped on that. They were working other things, and then systems thinking came to be what they're working on writing about now. The people at KnowledgeWorks and I go back a long time. We're both in Ohio, although Cincinnati, frankly, isn't much closer than Washington, D.C. But I've been down there, visited with them, met others of them in Columbus, ran into various events that the state organization sponsor, and followed there for probably 15 years or more, back to their original Future of Education publication. And I think they're on the 5th one now, I'm not sure. But what we do know is that the future of the original Futures publication is now way in the rearview mirror. I think it was 2010 or 2015, I'm not sure. So you can go back and check and see how they did on their futures. I'll tell you what, that I got some of my best ideas from them, no doubt. Part of that original Futures document really grounded my thinking, and has framed what I've thought about for the last 10 years anyway, probably more. And some of their other ideas that they exposed me to in their early writings. So we're going to talk about systems thinking. It's important, and KnowledgeWorks, it's important to recognize that I introduced myself from the very beginning as a systems engineer, because that's how I started my career. I was hired by the Northrop Grumman Corporation, then just Northrop, to do advanced systems engineering at their advanced systems division on what was decidedly one of the most complicated integrated systems of that time. Because I was there very early in the process, I got to work with the manager of systems engineering hired me, avionics systems engineering, but we don't, in the position we were in, it wasn't just electronics. We dealt with the whole spectrum of operations and facilities, preparations, details of an airborne weapon system. And those are quite complex. If you think about systems right now, it's everything that is on the iPhone that I'm recording is on, all the sensors, the cameras, all the integrated navigation system, gyros, and many more systems were on that aircraft that we were designing, plus a lot of what we euphemistically call effectors. A robot arm can be an effector, but so can other things. So systems thinking is in my absolute, if not my DNA, my grounding from the very beginning. And I never approached KnowledgeWorks other than saying, I'm a systems engineer. I now work in systems engineering, or systems engineering in education. That's what I do. So I just wanted to quickly bring in that as we follow on to design thinking, the idea of systems thinking as it's brought into and used in education. And this segment is titled Systems Thinking Poets, because the people who they pay to do their systems thinking are journalism majors. That's a fine occupation. We need journalists. We need better journalists than we have if you followed some of the national politics. But it's not engineering. People who want to design things, who are excited about building things, don't go into journalism. They don't go into writing. They go and study how the world works in detail, and they go to have their minds as young people bent into a form of analysis and design in a detailed way that looks at the physical world, and in the case of education, the psychological world. It's very different from coming up through a journalism profession. Doesn't mean you can't swatch over. It just says, if you want systems thinking done, think about getting some systems engineers. If we go back to 10 years ago, that original futures forecast that KnowledgeWorks put out, one of the things they talked about was the expanded learning ecosystem. And they've employed that, something like that, various times, and so have I. The question is, how do we design the expanded learning ecosystem, specifically for high school? And what that means is that more than just the people involved, employed by a school, are part of the education of high school youth. In the time that's passed since then, what that's actually come to mean is far and far more associate professors at community colleges. We could talk about that later, but that's not what we were talking about when we originally envisioned the expanded learning ecosystem. So as we talk about system thinking and going forward, remember back what I said earlier about learning and school is knowledge-based. If you go through the documents of systems thinking and again design thinking, you won't hear a lot of talk about knowledge. And that's a problem. Because that's what we're there to schools. We're there to raise young people, obviously, but a lot of that is knowledge. Some of it's very basic knowledge, how to tie your shoe or eat with the right fork, maybe. How to think about the problem that the person across from you has. But that comes with knowledge. It's practicing it becomes a skill, but all of those things start with knowledge. So, knowledge, one thing we need for systems thinking attitude, sure enough. But writing about systems thinking isn't enough. You gotta actually do it. So, let's get on with that. We're ready, getting closer and closer to taking on how we actually need to do to transform high school for the next generation. Let's go. One of the products of the KnowledgeWorks Futures team is called the Education Changemakers Guide to Systems Thinking. It's come out this year, I think, and they've been promoting it a lot, and they're still working on it. I wanted to zoom in on one particular thing, and they're talking about using systems thinking in terms of solving problems in schools. But I'm going to zoom in on this little bit where they're talking about the problem of, as so many of these are, systemic bias, and in particular for the kids of color being singled out disproportionately for disciplinary action. And so they go through a systems thinking process, which is not unlike a design systems thinking or how anyone, frankly, would sit down and go through something. But I would zoom in right here on this part where they actually asked the kids what the problem was. And of course, there's a perception that, rightly or wrongly, they're being singled out. But then they kind of admit, Well, they might be giving a little bit of an issue because they're bored. They're not learning anything. They feel that whatever is being given to them in the classroom is not really useful learning. That's the problem we need to solve. We need to fix that. And even if it is useful, there comes a time, and this is crucial. Only if it's only one class a day or part of a period of a day, it gives kids something to focus on and go, that's the thing I'm interested in. I'm going to school today because of that thing, and I'll get through the rest of the day. You need to give every kid that. Systems approach will figure out how to do that. That's where we're headed.